The first time my family saw the man I had married, my father looked at the grease beneath his fingernails, my sister looked at his secondhand suit, and my mother whispered, "You have ruined your life." 12 years later, they stood inside a crowded hotel ballroom while that same mechanic walked onto a stage beneath his own name. What they learned that night was not that he had secretly become rich. It was that he had been protecting something far more complicated than money. And I had not known the whole truth either. I was 29 when I met Daniel Mercer. At the time, I worked as an event coordinator for a luxury hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina. I came from a family that cared deeply about appearances and called that concern standards. My father, Richard Whitmore, owned a successful regional accounting firm. My mother, Elaine, served on charity boards and could turn a seating chart into a moral judgment. My older sister, Vanessa, had married a surgeon and lived in a gated community where even the trash cans disappeared behind brick walls. I was the disappointment, who kept refusing to become impressive in the approved way. I had studied hospitality instead of law. I rented a small apartment downtown instead of buying a townhouse near my parents. I dated men my family described as promising, then ended those relationships because the men seemed more interested in my father's approval than in me. Daniel owned a 2-bay repair shop on the edge of town. The sign read, "Mercer Auto and Diesel," in faded red letters. One bay door stuck halfway in winter. The waiting area had 3 mismatched chairs, a coffee machine that produced something close to mud, and a jar of hard candy that had probably been there since the previous owner. I met him because my car broke down during a thunderstorm. The engine began shaking near an exit ramp, then died beside a grocery store. My roadside assistance company said the nearest available shop was Mercer Auto. Daniel arrived in an old tow truck, wearing navy coveralls. Rain ran off his hair as he checked the engine. "What happened?" I asked. He looked at me. "It stopped." "I know that." "That's what happened." I should have been offended. Instead, I laughed. He smiled slightly. Then he said, "You may have killed the fuel pump." I did not personally attack the fuel pump. "No, ma'am, but it looks injured." That was Daniel. Dry humor, few words, careful eyes. He towed my car to the shop and stayed late to diagnose it. The replacement part would take a day, so he drove me home. His truck smelled like oil, peppermint gum, and rain. On the way, he asked what I did. When I told him I coordinated weddings, he said, "That sounds dangerous." Weddings? People spending money while emotional. I laughed again. When we reached my building, he refused a tip. "Save it," he said. "The fuel pump is going to hurt." The next day, he charged less than the dealership estimate. He showed me the old part and explained exactly what failed. I noticed his hands. They were scarred, strong, and gentle with small pieces. I also noticed a faded burn mark along his left wrist. "What happened there?" I asked. He pulled down his sleeve. "Old mistake." He did not explain. I returned 2 weeks later because my brakes made a noise. They did not. I had imagined it. Daniel took the car around the block and said, "Your brakes are fine." I heard something. "Maybe the radio." I know the difference between brakes and radio. He leaned against the counter. "Do you?" I crossed my arms. He smiled. That was our second conversation. Our first date was at a diner beside the shop. He ordered meatloaf and iced tea. I ordered a salad because I was nervous, then ate half his fries. He told me he was 33 and had grown up in a small town near Asheville. His mother died when he was 19. His father had been in and out, which I later learned meant prison, treatment programs, and long periods of disappearance. Daniel left community college to work full-time at a repair shop. He eventually bought Mercer Auto from an older mechanic who let him pay over 7 years. "What did you study?" I asked. "Mechanical engineering." I looked surprised. "You went to college for engineering?" "For a while." "Why didn't you finish?" "Life." He said the word gently but firmly. I understood it was a closed door. I did not push. My family met him 3 months later at my father's birthday dinner. Daniel wore a charcoal suit he bought from a resale shop. I knew because he asked me whether the sleeves looked too long. He brought my father a first edition repair manual for a 1967 Jaguar E-Type. My father had owned that car in his 20s and still talked about it. The gift was thoughtful. My father barely looked at it. At dinner, Vanessa's husband, Paul, asked Daniel whether he planned to expand beyond manual labor. Daniel replied, "Eventually, I hope to use both hands." Paul laughed, as if Daniel had made a joke for him. My mother asked where Daniel's parents lived. "My mother passed away," he said. "My father is not in my life." The silence that followed made his loss sound like poor manners. Then my father asked, "What is your 5-year plan?" Daniel looked at him. "To be alive in 5 years?" My father did not smile. "I mean, professionally. Keep the shop profitable. Hire another technician. Maybe buy the property." My father nodded with polite disappointment. On the drive home, Daniel said, "They hate me. They do not know you. They know enough for their purposes." I defended them. That was my first mistake. "They are protective." "Of you?" "Yes." "From what?" I did not answer. Daniel reached over and squeezed my hand. "I am not asking you to choose." But eventually, they did. When Daniel proposed, he did it inside the repair shop after closing. He had cleaned the floor, hung small white lights around the tool cabinets, and placed a folding table in the middle of the bay. There was pizza, 2 bottles of soda, and a chocolate cake that leaned slightly to one side. He gave me a simple ring with a small diamond. "I cannot promise you luxury," he said, "but I can promise you will always know where I stand." I believed him. I said yes. My parents reacted as if I had announced a serious illness. My mother cried. Vanessa said I was confusing rebellion with love. My father asked Daniel to meet him privately. Daniel refused. "If he wants to talk about our future, you should be there," he said. So my father invited both of us to his office. He offered Daniel money. Not directly at first. He said he could help Daniel purchase a larger shop if we postponed the wedding for 2 years. Daniel asked, "What happens after 2 years?" "We see where things stand." My father folded his hands. "You are both emotional. Marriage is not only affection, it is stability." Daniel said, "I agree." My father looked surprised. "Then you understand my concern." "I understand that you think my bank account measures whether I can love your daughter." My father's voice hardened. "I think reality matters." "So do I." Daniel stood. "We are not taking your money." On the way out, my father said to me, "If you marry him, do not expect us to finance the consequences." I stopped. "I never asked you to." "You will." I married Daniel 4 months later. My parents did not attend. Vanessa came to the ceremony but left before dinner. We had 40 guests in a converted warehouse with brick walls and string lights. The hotel baker made the cake as a gift. Daniel's old shop owner, Mr. Ortega, walked me down the aisle after I realized my father would not change his mind. I was happy. I was also wounded. Those feelings can exist together. The first years were difficult in ordinary ways. Daniel worked 6 days a week. The shop barely covered payroll during winter. Our rental house had unreliable heating and a kitchen floor that sloped toward the refrigerator. I left the hotel after Lily was born and took a corporate events job with better hours. Daniel hired an apprentice named Marcus, then lost a major fleet contract when the company changed vendors. There were nights when we counted every dollar. Once, I paid the electric bill with a credit card and did not tell Daniel for 3 weeks. He found the statement. "You hid this," he said. "I knew you would feel guilty." "I need the truth more than protection." That sentence became important later. Our marriage was loving, but not perfect. Daniel withdrew when he was worried. He would sit in the garage after work and say he needed time to think. He hated debt, disliked attention, and became tense whenever anyone asked about his childhood. I responded by trying to fix everything. I found new clients for the shop. I redesigned his website without asking. I volunteered him for a local business association. Sometimes I confused support with management. He would say, "I need a wife, not a consultant." I would answer, "Then stop making problems I have to solve." We both said things we regretted. Still, we built a life. We bought a small home near a public park. Lily grew into a curious, stubborn child who loved taking apart broken toys with her father. Daniel taught her how engines worked before she could multiply. My parents saw us rarely. At first, I called every week. My mother spoke to me as though I were living through a phase. "Is the shop still open?" "Yes." "Are you managing?" "Yes." "Your father worries." "Then he can call me." He never did. When Lily was 5, my parents invited us to Thanksgiving. Daniel repaired my father's old lawn tractor before dinner without being asked. My father thanked him by saying, "You are good with your hands." Daniel replied, "That is usually required." The tension never left. Vanessa was worse. Her life looked perfect until it did not. Paul's medical practice faced an insurance investigation. The details were complicated, but several billing decisions created legal costs and damaged his reputation. They sold their second home and withdrew their sons from private school. Vanessa called me crying. I listened. I did not say, "Reality matters." Daniel quietly offered to inspect their older car for free. They refused. Pride is expensive. Around our 8th anniversary, Mercer Auto began changing. Daniel purchased the property with a bank loan. He added 2 bays and hired 3 technicians. He developed a diagnostic process for commercial vans that reduced repeat repairs. The shop became known among delivery fleets and utility contractors. We were no longer struggling. But Daniel remained careful. He still drove the same truck. He still packed lunch. He reinvested most profits. My parents barely noticed. To them, he remained the poor mechanic I had chosen against their advice. Then, unusual things began happening. A man in a gray suit visited the shop after hours. Daniel started receiving calls he would take outside. Packages arrived from universities and engineering companies. One envelope had a logo from North Carolina State University. When I asked, Daniel said, "It is related to an old project." "What project?" "Nothing important yet." I did not like the word yet. Then he began traveling 1 weekend a month. He said he was consulting on engine testing. I asked for details. He became vague. That frightened me because Daniel had always promised I would know where he stood. "Are you in trouble?" I asked one night. "No." "Are you borrowing money?" "No." "Are you sick?" "No." "Then tell me." He looked at the floor. "I cannot yet." I felt betrayed. Not because I suspected another woman, because secrecy had entered the part of our marriage I trusted most. For 6 months, the pattern continued. Daniel left early on Fridays and returned Sunday night. Sometimes he smelled like machine oil, sometimes like airport soap. He brought no gifts, posted no photographs, and avoided questions. I checked our accounts. No unusual withdrawals. I checked the shop's public records. No lawsuits. I hated myself for investigating him. Then my mother called with news. My father's accounting firm had lost a large client and was facing a partner dispute. One partner accused another of hiding losses connected to risky real estate investments. My father had personally guaranteed part of the firm's credit line. The amount was serious. He had also borrowed against their home. My mother's voice shook. "Your father says it will be resolved. Does he need help?" He would never ask. I knew that meant yes. I told Daniel. He listened quietly. "How much?" he asked. "I do not know." "Do they want money?" "They would rather lose everything than ask us." Daniel nodded. "That sounds familiar." I ignored the comment. 2 weeks later, my father called me for the first time in years. He did not apologize. He asked whether I knew anyone interested in purchasing a warehouse property one of his clients needed to sell quickly. The property was near Daniel's shop. I asked Daniel. He reviewed the listing and said no. My father heard the answer as rejection. "Of course," he said. "He does not understand commercial opportunity." Daniel was standing beside me and heard every word. He took the phone. "Mr. Whitmore, the building has environmental contamination from an old plating operation. The remediation could exceed the purchase price." My father became quiet. "How do you know that?" "I reviewed the state records." "Why?" "Because your daughter asked." My father said, "I have accountants and attorneys reviewing it." "Then ask whether they checked the groundwater notices." The deal collapsed 3 days later when contamination was confirmed. My father never thanked him. That should have ended Daniel's willingness to help. It did not. The secret emerged because Lily found a photograph. She was 11 and searching the office for printer paper. Inside Daniel's locked desk drawer, which she had accidentally left open, she found a framed photograph of a teenage boy standing beside him. The boy resembled Daniel. Same eyes, same crooked smile. On the back was written, "Ethan, age 17, Regional Engineering Challenge." Lily brought it to me. "Who is Ethan?" I had no idea. When Daniel came home, I placed the photograph on the table. His face went pale. "Where did you find this?" "Your desk." He looked at Lily. She began crying. "I am sorry. I was looking for paper." Daniel hugged her. "You did nothing wrong." Then he asked her to go upstairs. I said, "Who is Ethan?" Daniel sat down. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he answered, "My son." The room seemed to tilt. "You have a son?" "Yes." "How old?" 22. I calculated. Daniel had been 23 when Ethan was born. "Where is he?" "Raleigh." "Why did you never tell me?" His eyes filled. "Because I was ashamed." "Of him?" "No, of what happened." Ethan's mother was named Michelle. She and Daniel dated briefly during community college. She became pregnant, and Daniel wanted to marry her. Her parents opposed the relationship. Then Daniel's father was arrested again. Michelle's family used it as proof Daniel was unstable. They moved her to Virginia before Ethan was born. Daniel signed an agreement giving Michelle full custody while he worked and tried to stabilize his life. He paid child support through a private arrangement. A year later, Michelle married another man who wanted to adopt Ethan. Daniel refused at first. Then, Michelle's attorney threatened a custody fight Daniel could not afford. She promised Ethan would have a stable home and asked Daniel to step away. Daniel signed the adoption consent. "I thought I was doing what was best," he said. "Did you see him?" "Not after he was 2. I could barely breathe." "You had a child and never told your wife." "I wrote him letters. Michelle kept them. When he turned 18, she gave them to him." "And now?" "He contacted me 4 years ago." 4 years. Daniel had hidden contact with his son for 4 years. The weekend trips were to see Ethan. The university packages were connected to Ethan's engineering work. The man in the gray suit was an attorney helping establish intellectual property rights. I felt rage, grief, and pity all at once. "Why didn't you tell me when he contacted you?" Daniel whispered, "I was afraid you would think I lied about who I was." "You did lie." "I know. You let me defend you to my family while hiding an entire son." "I was afraid of losing you." "So you decided secrecy was safer." He covered his face. The words he once said to me returned. "I need the truth more than protection." He had failed his own standard. I slept in the guest room that night. For weeks, our marriage felt unfamiliar. Ethan knew about me and Lily. Daniel had shown him photographs. He had wanted to meet us, but Daniel kept delaying. "He was waiting for me to be brave," Daniel admitted. I asked whether Ethan needed money. "No." "Is he the secret project?" "Partly." Then Daniel explained the rest. Ethan had completed an engineering degree and developed a retrofit control system for older commercial diesel engines. The system used sensors and adaptive software to reduce fuel use and emissions without replacing the engine. Daniel had helped him build prototypes at the shop. The consulting trips were testing sessions with a university lab and 2 fleet operators. The technology was promising. But it was not a magical invention worth billions. There were patents, certification requirements, manufacturing risks, and years of possible failure ahead. Daniel and Ethan formed a small company called Mercer Adaptive Systems. Ethan owned 60%. Daniel owned 25%. The rest belonged to 2 engineers who joined the project. "Why hide that?" I asked. "Because Ethan did not want publicity before testing, and because telling you about the company meant telling you about him." The invention was not the real secret. Ethan was. I agreed to meet him. We chose a quiet restaurant in Raleigh. Ethan arrived early. He was tall, nervous, and dressed more formally than necessary. When he saw Lily, his expression broke into a smile that looked exactly like Daniel's. He brought her a small model engine kit. "I did not know what 11-year-olds like," he said. Lily replied, "I like taking things apart." Daniel laughed. For the first hour, conversation was awkward. Then Ethan told me he had grown up knowing he was adopted by his stepfather. He loved the man who raised him. He did not contact Daniel because he needed a replacement father. "I wanted to know where I came from," he said. He showed me the letters Daniel wrote over 16 years. Birthday letters, school year letters, letters describing the shop, mistakes, and hopes. Michelle had kept them sealed until Ethan turned 18. I read one. "Dear Ethan, today I bought a broken repair shop. That may not sound like good news, but I hope one day I can tell you I built something steady." I had never seen Daniel's handwriting look so careful. Later, Ethan said, "He talks about you constantly." I looked at Daniel. Apparently not constantly enough. Ethan lowered his eyes. I regretted the bitterness. The fault was not his. Over time, Ethan became part of our lives. Slowly. Lily adored him. She called him her surprise brother, which made him laugh and ache at the same time. I struggled more. Every new story about Daniel's past reminded me how much I had not known. Trust returned through difficult conversations. Daniel gave me access to the company records. He showed me every letter. He answered questions even when the answer made him look weak. I learned Michelle had not been cruel. She had been young and pressured. The adoption gave Ethan stability. Daniel's shame had grown because the decision was partly loving and partly cowardly. That complexity made forgiveness harder and more honest. Meanwhile, my father's financial situation worsened. His firm lost 2 partners. A lender demanded additional collateral. My parents listed their vacation home. Vanessa called me. Dad needs an investor. Then he should speak to an investment advisor. He needs family. I almost laughed. When I needed family at my wedding, where were they? This is not the time. It was never the time when I was the one hurt. She became angry. You have always wanted to punish us for not approving of Daniel. I wanted respect. You chose struggle. No, I chose a person, Vanessa said. And now suddenly he is traveling and meeting engineers? What is he hiding? I froze. How do you know? Mom saw something online. A local business publication had mentioned Mercer Adaptive Systems in a short article about university partnerships. Daniel's name appeared as co-founder. My family assumed the secret was wealth. My mother called the next day. Why didn't you tell us Daniel owned a technology company? Because it is early stage and private. Is it valuable? That was her first question. Not what does it do? Not how did this happen? Is it valuable? I do not know. Your father might be able to advise him. I nearly laughed. Years earlier, my father had offered Daniel money to prove he was worthy. Now he wanted access. Daniel refused a meeting. He does not respect the work, he said. He respects the possibility of money. I agreed, but the story became more complicated. Mercer Adaptive Systems needed accounting help to prepare for outside investment. Ethan's university advisor recommended a firm. The firm was one my father had once trained with, not his current company. Still, the financial world was small. My father learned the company had secured a pilot program with a national delivery fleet. He also learned investors were interested. Suddenly, invitations arrived. My mother invited us to Christmas. Vanessa suggested a family weekend. My father mailed Daniel a handwritten note praising American manufacturing. Daniel read it once and placed it in a drawer. Are you going to answer? I asked. No. Maybe they are trying. They are repositioning. He was right, but I wanted the family I had never received. That was my weakness. I told myself accepting one dinner would not erase the past. We attended Christmas at my parents' home. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Some artwork was gone. My mother served fewer courses. My father greeted Daniel warmly. Too warmly. He asked detailed questions about patents, licensing, and investment rounds. Daniel answered politely but revealed little. Then my father said, I always knew you were capable of more than the repair shop. The room became silent. Daniel placed his fork down. The repair shop built everything I have. I meant no offense. You did. My mother interrupted. Richard is trying to compliment you. Daniel replied, a compliment that erases 20 years of work is not much of one. Vanessa sighed. Can we not turn dinner into an argument? I surprised everyone. Dad turned our wedding into a financial evaluation. He can survive one uncomfortable dinner. My father looked at me. You are still holding that against us? Yes. At some point, adults move on. At some point, adults apologize. No one spoke. We left before dessert. In the car, Daniel said, "Thank you." I looked out the window. I should have said it 12 years ago. The company's first major public event took place 18 months later. Mercer Adaptive Systems completed a successful pilot across 300 delivery vehicles. The results showed meaningful fuel savings and lower emissions. A manufacturing partner agreed to produce the retrofit units. The company hosted a presentation at a Charlotte hotel for fleet managers, investors, engineers, and local media. It was not a glamorous product launch. There were technical slides, test data, and too much coffee. But it mattered. I helped organize the event. My parents learned about it through the business press and asked to attend. Daniel said, "Your decision." I invited them. Part of me wanted them to see. That truth embarrassed me. I wanted the moment when they understood they had been wrong. We all imagine revenge as anger. Sometimes revenge is simply wanting witnesses. The ballroom held around 200 people. Ethan presented the engineering data. He spoke clearly, confidently, and without exaggeration. Then he introduced Daniel. "My biological father taught me that machines are honest," Ethan said. "If something fails, there is a reason. You find it, you repair it, and you do not blame the machine for showing you the weakness." My parents sat in the front row. I watched my father's face. Daniel walked onto the stage wearing a simple, dark suit. He did not look like a poor mechanic. He did not look like a secret millionaire. He looked like himself. He spoke about fleet mechanics who kept old vehicles running because replacement costs were too high. He spoke about practical engineering, small shops, and skilled tradespeople who were often ignored by large companies. Then he thanked the team. Finally, he said, "This project exists because my son asked a question I was too afraid to answer for most of his life." The room became quiet. Daniel told the truth publicly. Not every detail. Enough. He said he had a son he gave up for adoption when he was young and unstable. He said they reunited after 18 years. He said Mercer Adaptive Systems grew from the work they began while rebuilding their relationship. My mother covered her mouth. Vanessa turned toward me. My father stared at the stage. They had learned his secret, but not the one they expected. After the presentation, my family surrounded us near the ballroom entrance. My mother whispered, "Daniel has a son?" "Yes." "And you knew?" "For the last 3 years." Vanessa said, "How could he hide that from you?" The question was fair. The tone was not. I answered, "He should not have. We worked through it." My father looked at Daniel. "You gave up a child?" Daniel met his eyes. "Yes." My father's expression carried judgment. Daniel continued, "I was 23. I was poor, ashamed of my father, and convinced stability belonged to other families. I made a decision I thought would protect my son. Part of it was love, part of it was fear." My father said, "And now you are in business together?" "Yes." "Is Ethan the inventor?" "He is the lead engineer and majority owner." That surprised him. My family had assumed Daniel controlled everything. He did not. He had built the shop, funded prototypes, and provided practical knowledge. But the company was designed to protect Ethan's work. My father asked, "What is your ownership?" Daniel smiled slightly. "Enough." The old Daniel would have answered defensively. The newer one did not need to. Then my father said, "I misjudged you." It was the first apology he had ever offered, but Daniel did not accept it immediately. "You judged me accurately in one way," he said. My father frowned. I was poor. I was ashamed. I had failed someone I loved. What you misjudged was whether those facts made me unworthy of your daughter." My father looked at me. Daniel continued, "She did not marry my future success. She married me before any of this existed." That was the final revelation my family needed. The secret was not that the mechanic had secretly been powerful all along. He had been exactly what they saw: poor, scarred, incomplete. He had also been hardworking, intelligent, and capable of becoming more without pretending his past never happened. My mother began crying. "I thought we were protecting her." I said, "You were protecting the picture you had of our family." She nodded. "We were ashamed." Of me? Of what people would say. The honesty hurt, but it was better than excuses. Vanessa looked toward Ethan, who was speaking with Lily. "Does Lily understand?" "Yes." "And she is fine?" "She was hurt that we kept it from her. She also gained a brother." Vanessa said, "You make everything sound simple." It was not simple. That was important. The reconciliation people later imagined did not happen in one ballroom conversation. My father did not suddenly become warm. My mother did not stop caring about appearances. Daniel did not forget the wedding they skipped. Trust returned unevenly. My parents invited Ethan to dinner. He agreed once, then declined several times. Daniel and my father began speaking occasionally about business, but Daniel refused financial involvement. When my father offered to invest, Daniel said no. "You do not need our money?" my father asked. "We need investors who understand the product and accept the governance structure." "I understand business." "You understand control." My father did not like that, but he respected it. Mercer Adaptive Systems grew steadily. The company licensed its technology to 2 manufacturers and hired 23 employees. Daniel continued owning Mercer Auto. He never became a billionaire. He did become financially secure. More importantly, the shop created a training program for young mechanics who wanted to move into diagnostics and engineering support. Ethan led technical development. Their relationship remained complicated. Sometimes Ethan resented the years Daniel was absent. Sometimes Daniel tried too hard to compensate. They attended counseling together for a while. That impressed me more than any business success. People praise reconciliation without describing the work. The work is repetition, showing up, answering the same painful question again. Accepting that forgiveness does not erase grief. My marriage changed too. I stopped treating Daniel's silence as something I had to manage. He stopped using silence as protection. We created a rule. If one of us said, "There is something difficult," the other would listen before reacting. That rule saved us several times. My relationship with my family never returned to what it had been. It became something more honest. Vanessa apologized first. She came to my house one afternoon carrying no gift, which was unusual for her. "I was cruel," she said. "You were." "I thought marrying Paul proved I had made better choices." I waited. She looked down. "When his career fell apart, I realized I'd built my identity around being approved." "That sounds familiar." She smiled sadly. "I envied you." "For what?" "You chose someone without permission." That surprised me. I'd believed she saw me as foolish. She had. She also saw me as free. My mother's apology came in pieces: a phone call, a letter, a box containing the wedding invitation she had kept despite refusing to attend. She wrote, "I told myself not attending would make you reconsider. Instead, it only made sure I was absent from one of the happiest days of your life." I cried when I read it. My father struggled most. He believed apologizing meant surrendering authority. Then he suffered a minor stroke. Daniel visited him in rehabilitation. My father needed help adjusting a wheelchair footrest. Daniel knelt, examined the mechanism, and fixed it with a small tool from his pocket. My father said, "You always carry tools?" "Usually." "I suppose that is useful." Daniel looked at him. "It always was." My father closed his eyes. Then he said, "I am sorry I made usefulness sound like inferiority." That apology mattered because it named the insult. Years later, my father's accounting firm survived in a smaller form. He sold his ownership to younger partners and retired. My parents downsized. They lost status, not security. That distinction humbled them. They began attending Lily's school events and Ethan's company presentations. Not every event. Enough to show effort. Lily is 19 now and studying industrial design. She says she wants to create tools mechanics actually enjoy using. Daniel pretends not to be proud, then shows strangers her sketches. Ethan is 30. He is engaged to a civil engineer named Priya. He asked Daniel to stand beside him at the wedding, not as a replacement for the father who raised him, but as another father. Daniel cried for an hour after the call. The burn scar on his wrist came from an engine fire when he was 21. He was working nights, sleeping little, and trying to send money for Ethan. That was the old mistake he would not explain on our first date. Now he tells apprentices the story when they ignore safety procedures. Some secrets become useful after shame releases them. When I look back, I understand why the title people gave our story never felt accurate. They said I married a poor mechanic, and later, my family learned his secret. That sounds like a fairy tale in which the poor man was secretly extraordinary, and the judgmental family received a dramatic punishment. The truth was less convenient. Daniel was extraordinary in some ways and deeply flawed in others. My family was cruel, but not incapable of change. I was brave enough to marry him, but not brave enough to challenge my parents honestly for years. And the secret did not prove Daniel had always been worthy. He was worthy before success. He was also responsible for the pain his secrecy caused. Both truths mattered. The business could have failed. The technology might never have passed testing. If that had happened, marrying Daniel would not have become a mistake. That is what my family took years to understand. A person's value is not proven by the moment other people finally recognize profit. It is shown in the life they build when recognition never comes. Daniel built a shop. He paid debts. He raised Lily. He wrote letters to a son he believed he had lost. He made mistakes and eventually told the truth. Those things mattered before the ballroom, the investors, and the newspaper articles. At our 20th anniversary, Daniel took me back to the repair shop. The original waiting room chairs were gone. The coffee was better. The old red sign had been restored and hung inside the new training center. He placed a folding table in the middle of the first bay. Pizza, soda, a chocolate cake leaning slightly to one side. Lily and Ethan hid in the office and came out laughing after he gave me a new ring. Not a larger diamond, a simple band engraved with 4 words. You always knew enough. I cried. Then I told him, no, I knew what I chose. I did not know everything. He nodded. You should have. We stood quietly. That was the difference between the man I married and the man he became. The young Daniel believed hiding pain protected love. The older Daniel understood love cannot be protected from truth. My family once thought poverty was the danger. It was not. Pride was. Their pride made them abandon my wedding. Daniel's pride made him hide his son. My pride made me pretend neither wound affected me as deeply as it did. The secret did not save us. Telling it did. Years later, when people asked my father what he thought of his son-in-law, he no longer mentioned the company. He said, "Daniel can fix almost anything, but he has learned not to hide what is broken." That may be the kindest thing my father ever said, and it was true. The poor mechanic my family rejected never turned into a prince. He remained a mechanic. He also became a father again, an engineer in practice, a mentor, a business partner, and a husband willing to repair what he had damaged. My family learned his secret in a ballroom. I learned it slowly, across years. His deepest secret was not his son, his invention, or the company. It was the belief he carried from childhood that love depended on hiding every part of himself that might disappoint someone. Once that belief was exposed, all of us had to decide whether we wanted appearances or truth. My parents had chosen appearances once. Daniel had chosen secrecy. I had chosen silence. The life we built afterward was not perfect. It was honest. And honest love, I learned, is worth more than any future success my family once demanded as proof.